My wife vanished with $80,000 of our savings. A year later, she texted, "I've had my fun. Now I'm ready to be a wife again." But when she showed up at my door, the person who answered made her face turn ghost white. My name is Russell Lawson, but everyone calls me Russ. I'm 50 years old, and until last year, I thought I had it all figured out. A solid marriage to Yvonne, 2 grown kids who were making their way in the world, and a business that practically ran itself. 4 premium car wash locations across the county, pulling in about 15 grand a month in passive income while my managers handled the day-to-day operations. I'd wake up, check the numbers on my phone, maybe drive by one of the locations if I felt like it, and spend the rest of my time working on the house or planning our next vacation. Yvonne worked as a real estate agent. She was good at, too. Always closing deals, always networking at some event or another. I was proud of her hustle. She'd come home late smelling like wine and appetizers from open houses, and I'd ask how her day went. She'd kiss my cheek and say, "Exhausting," before heading upstairs to shower. I never questioned it. Why would I? It was a Tuesday morning in March when I found the note. Not even a real conversation, just a piece of paper on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. I still remember the exact words because they burned themselves into my brain. I need to find myself again. Don't wait for me. I'm sorry. That was it. No phone call, no tearful explanation, no attempt to work things out. Just 7 words and a half-hearted apology. Her car was gone from the driveway. Half her closet was empty, and our joint savings account was lighter by $80,000. I stood there in my bathrobe holding that note and felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. The first few weeks were the hardest. I called her phone maybe 100 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. I drove past her office, but her colleague said she'd taken an indefinite leave of absence. Our kids, Owen and Piper. They knew something I didn't. I could tell by the way they avoided my eyes when I asked if they'd heard from their mother. Owen especially. He got defensive real quick. "She's going through something. Dad, just give her space." Like I was the problem. Like I was suffocating her by existing. I learned later, much later, that they'd been sending her money, helping fund whatever midlife crisis she was living out while I was back home trying to hold her family together. 3 months after Yvonne left, I stopped counting the days. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for a text that never came. I started living again, or at least going through the motions. Wake up, shower, check the business numbers, find something to fix around the house. The lawn needed mowing every week. The gutters needed cleaning. The fence had a loose board that I kept meaning to replace, but never got around to. That's when I noticed Thea. She'd moved into the rental house across the street sometime in late May. I wasn't paying much attention to the neighborhood back then, too wrapped up in my own head. But one morning, I was out front watering the flower beds that Yvonne used to maintain, and I saw this woman in scrubs getting out of a beat-up Honda Civic. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that settles into your bones after a long night shift. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, coffee cup in one hand, keys in the other. She glanced over and gave me a small wave. I nodded back, not really in the mood for conversation. Thea Kimball. I learned her name was. She worked as an ICU nurse at County Memorial, pulling 12-hour shifts that rotated between days and nights. She was 35, never married, and living alone in a house that was too big for one person. Kind of like me. We didn't talk much at first, just the occasional wave when we crossed paths. She'd be leaving for work as I was checking my mailbox. I'd be taking out the trash as she was coming home. Small-town courtesy, nothing more. Then one Saturday morning, I was in my driveway changing the oil in my truck when she walked over carrying a plate covered in foil. "You look like you could use some homemade cookies," Thea said, her voice warm, but not pushy. She set the plate on my workbench. Chocolate chip. Fair warning. They're a little burn on the bottom. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at her. She wasn't trying to flirt or pry into my business. She was just being neighborly. Something about that simple gesture hit me harder than I expected. "Thanks," I said, my voice rougher than intended. "I'm Russ." "I know," she replied with a slight smile. "I've seen your name on the mailbox. I'm Thea." "Yeah, the scrubs kind of gave away the profession," I said, attempting something like humor. She laughed, a genuine sound that I hadn't heard in my own yard for months. Observant. "You are from home?" "Sort of. I own a few car washes. My managers handle most of the work." I paused, then added, "Gives me plenty of time to overthink everything." Thea studied me for a moment, not with pity, but understanding. "Well, if you ever need to overthink out loud, I'm usually home on Wednesday mornings. I make decent coffee." She didn't wait for an answer, just turned and walked back across the street, leaving me standing there with a plate of slightly burnt cookies and a strange feeling that maybe life wasn't completely frozen after all. I ate 3 cookies before noon. They were perfect. Wednesday morning came around and I found myself walking across the street to Thea's house with no real plan, just a vague invitation and the realization that I'd spent too many mornings alone with my thoughts. The coffee she made was strong enough to strip paint, served in mismatched mugs she'd picked up from thrift stores. "So, what's your story?" Russ, Thea asked, settling into a worn armchair across from me. Direct, no dancing around it. I appreciated that. "My wife left almost 4 months ago," I said, the words coming easier than I expected. Note on the counter, half the savings gone. No explanation, just decided she needed to find herself. Thea nodded slowly, her expression neutral. "That's rough. You hear from her at all?" "Not a word. Our kids seem to know more than they're telling me, but they're keeping her secrets." I took a long drink of the bitter coffee. "Owen. My son. He acts like I'm the villain for even asking questions. And Piper. My daughter. She just cries and says, 'Mum needed space.' Space from what Thea asked. That's the $1,000,000 question." I set the mug down on the side table. 26 years of marriage, and apparently I was suffocating her without knowing it. Thea was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. "My dad died last year. Cancer. I was his nurse toward the end. Took care of him at home through hospice." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Your brother Russell," she continued, her voice careful. "He was one of my patients 3 years ago. Different hospital, different unit. But I remember him. You visited every day during his final week. The air in the room shifted. I stared at her, pieces clicking into place. You knew who I was when you moved in. I recognized you." "Yeah," Thea admitted. "But I didn't bring it up because I wasn't sure if you'd remember me. We only crossed paths a few times in the hallways. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I processed that information looking for anger or betrayal, but finding neither. Why tell me now?" "Because you deserve honesty," she said simply. "And because I don't want to build a friendship on something left unsaid. Your brother was a good man. You were there for him when it mattered. That says a lot about who you are." I nodded, throat tight. He was the better Lawson brother, that's for sure. "I doubt that," Thea replied with a small smile. "But you can keep thinking it if it helps." We sat there drinking terrible coffee, and somehow the morning felt less heavy than when I'd walked through her door. July hit like a furnace, and the car washes were doing record business. People wanted their vehicles spotless for summer road trips, and my managers were working overtime, keeping up with demand. I should have been focused on the numbers, on maximizing profit during peak season. Instead, I found myself looking forward to Wednesday mornings with Thea. It became routine without us planning it that way. She'd work her night shifts Tuesday into Wednesday, get home around 7:00 in the morning, sleep until noon, and then I'd show up with pastries from the bakery downtown. We'd sit on her back porch, talk about everything and nothing. She told me about difficult patients, about the emotional toll of watching people slip away despite her best efforts. I told her about Owen's increasingly hostile phone calls and Piper's guilty silences. "Your kids are in a tough spot," Thea said one afternoon, her bare feet propped up on the porch railing. "They love both of you. But their mum probably painted a picture that makes you the bad guy." "What picture could she possibly paint?" I asked, frustration bleeding through. "I worked hard, provided for our family, never cheated, never raised my voice. What did I do that was so terrible? Maybe that's a problem," Thea said quietly. "You were steady, predictable, safe. Some people confuse that with boring. It stung because it was probably true. Yvonne used to call me a rock. When did rocks become something to run from instead of lean on one evening in late July? I was replacing the rotted boards on Thea's back deck when she came outside with 2 beers. She'd been off work for 3 days straight, catching up on sleep and looking more rested than I'd ever seen her. "You don't have to fix everything in my house, you know," she said, handing me a bottle. "I can hire someone." "I know," I replied, testing the new board's stability, "but I like working with my hands. Keeps me from overthinking." Thea sat down on the steps next to my toolbox. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot. Are you doing all this because you're trying to move on, or because you're still waiting for her to come back?" I stopped working and looked at her directly. 2 months ago, I would have said I was waiting. Now, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. "Fair enough," Thea said. She took a sip of her beer, then added, "For what it's worth, I think what comes next might be better than what came before." That night, after I went home, I stood in my bedroom and stared at the photos on the dresser. Me and Yvonne on our wedding day, young and stupid and sure we'd figured it all out. I took that photo and put it in a drawer, not out of anger, just acceptance. Some chapters end whether you're ready or not. It happened on a Tuesday night in late September, almost exactly 1 year after Yvonne had walked out. I was in the garage organizing tools. Thea was inside making dinner because she'd insisted I needed to eat something besides sandwiches and takeout. We'd grown comfortable with each other over the past few months. Comfortable enough that she had a toothbrush in my bathroom and I had a key to her place for emergencies. Nothing official. No labels. Just 2 people who'd found something worth holding on to. My phone buzzed on the workbench. Unknown number. But the message preview made my stomach drop before I even opened it fully. I've had my fun. Now I'm ready to be a wife again. Can we talk? No greeting. No apology. Just that like she'd been on vacation and was ready to come home now that the weather had turned cold. I stared at the screen until it went dark, then read it again when I woke it back up. A full year of silence. And this was what she chose to say. Thea appeared in the garage doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Dinner's almost ready. You coming in? Or should I bring you a plate out here?" I handed her the phone without a word. She read the message, her expression shifting from curious to understanding to something harder. "Are you going to respond?" Thea asked, her voice carefully neutral. "No," I said, the word coming out more certain than I felt. "There's nothing to say to that." "She's going to try again," Theoa warned. "People like that. They don't take silence well." She was right. Over the next 3 days, more messages came through, each one more desperate, more manipulative than the last. "I made a mistake. Please. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. The kids miss having us together. That last one made my blood boil. The kids. Like Owen hadn't been sending her money behind my back. Like Piper hadn't known exactly where her mother was this entire time while I worried and grieved and rebuilt my life from nothing. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I did something I should have done months ago. I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one who specialized in divorce cases where one party had abandoned the marriage and stolen marital assets. The consultation was enlightening. Turned out I had more legal standing than I'd thought. The money she'd taken, The year of abandonment, the complete lack of communication. It all worked in my favor. My attorney, a sharp woman named Barbara Chun, laid it out plainly. Mr. Lawson, if your wife wants to reconcile, she's going to have to do it through legal channels now, Barbara said, sliding papers across her desk. And given what you've told me, I'd recommend we start gathering evidence of any extramarital affairs. That'll strengthen your position considerably. How do I do that, I asked. Private investigator. I have someone I work with regularly. He's discreet, thorough, and fast. If there's something to find, he'll find it. I signed a retainer agreement that afternoon. Not out of revenge, but protection. Theo was starting to matter to me in ways that scared me, and I needed to make sure Yvonne couldn't blow up what we were building with some legal claim to my assets or my life. When I got home, Thea was sitting on my front porch, still in her scrubs from her shift. She stood when she saw me, searching my face for answers. I hired a lawyer, I said simply, and a private investigator. If she wants back in, she's going to find out it's too late. Thea didn't say anything. She just walked over and wrapped her arms around me, and I let myself hold on to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to shift under my feet. That night, I turned my phone completely off and left in a drawer. Whatever Yvonne had to say, she could say it to my attorney. I was done being her safety net. The knock came early on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after that first text message. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Theoa was upstairs taking a shower. We'd spend the night before going through old boxes in my attic, sorting what to keep and what to finally throw away. It felt symbolic somehow, clearing out the past to make room for whatever came next. The knocking was insistent, demanding. I knew who it was before I even looked through the window. Yvonne stood on my front porch, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine, hair perfect, makeup flawless, wearing an outfit that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent. She looked tan, rested, like she'd spent the past year at a spa instead of destroying a marriage. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there looking at this woman I'd spent 26 years with and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, no curiosity about where she'd been or what she'd done. Just a cold, empty space where those feelings used to live. The shower upstairs shut off. I heard Thea moving around in the bedroom. Yvonne knocked again, harder this time. Russell, I know you're in there. I can see your truck in the driveway. Please just talk to me. I walked to the door but didn't open it. You need to leave. Yvonne, there's nothing to talk about. I made a mistake. She called through the door, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used to use when she wanted something. I was confused. I needed time to figure things out. But I'm ready now. I want to come home. This isn't your home anymore, I said, my voice flat and factual. You left. You took $80,000 and disappeared for a year without a word. You don't get to just come back because you're ready now. Russell, please. I love you. I've always loved you. I just lost my way for a while. I almost laughed. Lost her way like she'd taken a wrong turn instead of deliberately walking out on everything we'd built together. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Thea appeared at the top of the landing wearing one of my old t-shirts, and her hair is still damp from the shower. She paused when she saw me at the door, reading the situation instantly. Want me to answer it? Thea asked quietly. I stepped back. Yeah, I think I would be perfect. Theoa walked to the door and opened it before I could second-guess the decision. Yvonne's carefully constructed expression shattered the moment she saw who was standing in my doorway in my house wearing my clothes. Her eyes went from Thea's face down to her stomach, which was just starting to show a gentle curve at 5 months along. We found out about the pregnancy 3 weeks ago, right around the time Yvonne had started sending those desperate text messages. Timing was everything, I guess. Yvonne's face went ghost white. All the color drained out of it like someone had pulled a plug. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "Can I help you?" Thea asked, her voice polite but firm, not hostile, not smug, just present and unshakable. "Who are you?" Yvonne finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Thea," she replied simply. "And you need to leave. Russell made it clear he doesn't want to talk to you." Yvonne looked past Thea. "Try and make eye contact with me," but I'd already turned away. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, listening as Thea calmly closed the door and locked it. Through the window. I watched Yvonne stand on the porch for a long moment, her perfect composure completely demolished. Then she turned and walked back to her car, her steps unsteady like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Thea came into the kitchen and stood beside me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprised to find it was true. "I really am." Owen showed up 2 days after Yvonne's failed visit, and he didn't come along. His wife, Melissa, was with him, and I could tell from the set of her jaw that she was the one pulling the strings. They found me in the driveway washing one of my personal vehicles, something I did on Sunday mornings to clear my head. "We need to talk." "Dad," Owen said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. He was 27 but acting like a teenager defending his mother's honor. I turned off the hose and faced them. "About what? About you replacing Mum like she never existed." Owen shot back. "About you moving some stranger in her house and getting her pregnant." "What the hell are you thinking?" "First of all, this is my house," I said, keeping my voice level but firm. "Your mother walked out on it over a year ago. Second, Thea is not a stranger and she's not replacing anyone. She's building something new with me, something your mother chose to destroy." "She made a mistake," Melissa interjected, her voice sharp. "People make mistakes. That doesn't mean you throw away a marriage. Your mother didn't make a mistake," I corrected, looking directly at Owen. "She made a choice. She chose to leave, chose to take $80,000 of her money, chose to disappear for a year without a word. Those are mistakes. Son, those are decisions. You don't know what she was going through," Owen argued. "She was struggling with getting older, with feeling invisible. She needed support, not judgment." I felt my patience wearing thin. I was her husband for 26 years. I gave her every kind of support there was to give. I worked hard to provide a good life, never cheated, never lied to her. If she was struggling, she could have talked to me instead of running away with someone else's money. Someone else's money. Melissa laughed bitterly. That was community property. She had every right to take it. "Not without telling me she was leaving," I countered. "Not by cleaning out accounts in the middle of the night like a thief. And definitely not while you two were helping fund her little adventure." Owen's face flushed. "She's our mother. We were helping her get back on her feet. She was on her feet the whole time." I said she just decided those feet didn't want to be standing next to me anymore. And you know what? I made my peace with that. I've moved on. What I won't tolerate is you two showing up at my house trying to guilt me into taking back someone who didn't respect me enough to have a conversation before destroying our marriage. "That baby doesn't change anything," Melissa said coldly, gesturing toward the house where Thea was visible through the kitchen window. "Legally. You're still married to Owen's mother. This is adultery and it'll matter in divorce court. You'd be surprised what my lawyer thinks about that," I replied. "Turns out abandonment for over a year gives me plenty of legal standing, and if we're talking about adultery, you might want to ask your mother-in-law what she was doing for the past year. My private investigator has very detailed reports." Owen went pale. "You hired a PI. I protected myself. I said simply, something I should have done a long time ago. Now, if you two are finished trying to intimidate me on my own property, I have work to do. This isn't over." "Dad," Owen said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "Mum's talking to her own lawyer. You're not going to get away with just cutting her out of everything. I'm not cutting her out of anything she didn't cut herself out of, I replied. She left. I'm just making it official. Now get off my property before I call the cops for trespassing. They left, Melissa practically dragging Owen back to their car. I watched them drive away, then went inside to find Thea sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. I heard most of that, she said quietly. Are you okay? I'm tired, I admitted, sitting down across from her. Tired of defending myself for surviving what she did to me. Tired of being treated like the villain because I didn't just sit around waiting for her to come back. Thea reached across the table and took my hand. Your son is being manipulated by his wife. Eventually. He'll figure that out. Maybe, I said. But right now he's choosing them over me. And I have to be okay with that. That afternoon, I called my lawyer and told her about Owen's visit and Melissa's threats. Barbara assured me that everything was proceeding as planned and that Yvonne's attorney hadn't filed any counterclaims yet. She's stalling, Barbara explained, hoping you'll cave and agree to mediation. Don't. We have a stronger position, and she knows it. 3 weeks after Owen's hostile visit, it was Piper who reached out, not with accusations or demands, but with a simple text. Can we meet for coffee? Just the two of us. I met her at a small cafe downtown on a cold November morning. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, looking nervous and guilty. Piper was 25, worked as an elementary school teacher, and had always been the peacemaker in our family. Thanks for coming. Dad, she said as I slid into the booth across from her. Of course, I replied. You're my daughter. I'll always make time for you. Piper's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I should have reached out sooner. I should have stood up for you when Owen was being awful. You were in a tough position, I said, though her apology meant more than she probably realized. I was a coward, Piper corrected herself. Mum called me right after she saw that woman Thea at the house. She was hysterical, saying you betrayed her, that you'd moved on so fast. And I just listened and didn't say what I should have said, which is that she has no right to be upset, Piper said firmly, anger creeping into her voice. That she left you. Dad. She walked out without a word and disappeared for over a year. What did she think was going to happen? That you just freeze your life and wait for her to decide she was done playing around? I felt something loosen in my chest. You knew where she was. I knew some of it. Piper admitted, wiping her eyes. She called me a few times. Said she was in California trying to figure things out. She never mentioned any guy. But Owen told me later that she'd been with someone. When that relationship fell apart, suddenly she wanted to come home like you were just her backup plan. That's exactly what I was, I said quietly. I'm ashamed that I sent her money. Piper continued. Owen and I both did, and we didn't tell you because we knew it was wrong. We were helping her hurt you. And I'm so sorry. I reached across the table and took her hand. Piper, you love your mother. I get that. I'm not asking you to choose sides. But I am choosing. She said. I'm choosing to tell you the truth. Last week, I heard Mum on the phone with her friend Janet. She was laughing about you, Dad, calling you predictable and boring. She said you were a reliable paycheck, but that she needed excitement, needed to feel young again. And when Janet asked why she wanted to come back now, Mum said, because stability looks better when you're broke and alone. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything I'd suspected. Yvonne hadn't loved me for who I was. She'd love what I provided, the safety and security and comfortable life. When she got bored with that, she traded it for adventure. And when the adventure ended badly, she wanted her safety net back. That must have been hard to hear. I said, it made me sick. Piper replied, and it made me realize that the woman, Thea, she's not stealing you from Mom. Mom threw you away. Thea's just smart enough to see what Mom did. We talked for another hour. Piper told me about her own struggles, how the divorce had forced her to examine her own relationship patterns, how she'd broken up with her boyfriend of 3 years because she realized she was settling for someone who didn't respect her. "You taught me that, Dad," she said. "Watching you refuse to take Mum back. Watching you choose your own happiness over what everyone expected you to do. That took guts." When we hugged goodbye in the parking lot, I felt like I got my daughter back. Not the child who had grown up in my house, but an adult who respected me enough to tell me the truth. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a cold morning in February, 8 months after Yvonne had first tried to come back. My attorney, Barbara, had prepared me for what to expect, but nothing really prepares you for sitting across a courtroom from someone you spent half your life with. Yvonne showed up looking expensive but tired. Her lawyer, a guy named Richard Paulson who specialized in protecting wealthy spouses, sat next to her shuffling papers. I sat with Barbara Thea beside me even though she was 8 months pregnant and probably should have been home resting. "I want to be here," Thea had insisted that morning. "You stood by me. I'm standing by you." The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Margaret Hale, reviewed the case file before looking up at both parties. "This appears to be a straightforward abandonment case. Mrs. Lawson, you left the marital home in March of last year and had no contact with your husband for 12 months. Is that correct?" Yvonne's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client was experiencing a mental health crisis and needed time to recover. She's ready to reconcile and seek counseling with her husband, Mr. Lawson. Do you wish to reconcile?" Judge Hale asked me directly. I stood. "No, Your Honor. I moved on with my life. I'm expecting a child with my partner, and I want this marriage legally dissolved." "Your Honor," Paulson interjected, "my client is entitled to half of the marital assets, including Mr. Lawson's business interests and retirement accounts." Barbara stood smoothly. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Lawson withdrew $80,000 from joint accounts without Mr. Lawson's knowledge or consent before abandoning the marriage. We also have documented evidence of multiple extramarital affairs over the past 3 years, including a year-long relationship with a man named Trevor Hastings that she maintained while still living in a marital home." I watched Yvonne's face go white. The private investigator had done his job well. Trevor wasn't just some random guy. He was a real estate investor she'd been seeing at work conferences for years before she finally left me for him. "These affairs are documented?" Judge Hale asked. "Extensively, Your Honor," Barbara replied, handing over a thick folder. "Hotel receipts, text messages recovered from cloud storage, witness statements from colleagues who were aware of the relationship." The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Yvonne's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Hale held up a hand. "Mrs. Lawson, is this information accurate?" Yvonne looked at her lawyer, then at me, then down at her hands. "I made mistakes. These aren't mistakes, Mrs. Lawson. These are deliberate choices made over an extended period." Judge Hale, close the folder. "I'm granting the divorce on grounds of abandonment and adultery, Mr. Lawson. You'll retain full ownership of your business assets and primary residence, Mrs. Lawson. You'll receive 15% of the marital assets accumulated during the marriage, minus the $80,000 you withdrew without consent. All retirement accounts remain with Mr. Lawson as he was the primary contributor." "Your Honor, that's not fair," Paulson protested. "Fair would be your client returning the money she stole and apologizing for wasting this court's time," Judge Hale replied sharply. "This divorce is granted. We're done here." Walking out of that courtroom with Thea's hand in mine felt like stepping out of a cage I've been trapped in for years. Yvonne tried to catch my eye in the hallway, but I kept walking. There was nothing left to say to her. "How do you feel?" Thea asked when we got to the parking lot. "Free," I said simply. "For the first time in over a year." I feel completely free. That afternoon, I called my lawyer and had her draft a new will. Everything went to Thea and her daughter. Owen would get nothing unless he came around. And even then, it would be a trust fund for any future grandchildren, not direct access to my assets. Piper would receive a substantial inheritance because she'd chosen honesty and family over blind loyalty. It wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting what mattered and rewarding those who'd stood by me when accounted. Our daughter, Emma Grace Lawson, was born on a Tuesday morning in late March. 7 pounds, 3 ounces with a full head of dark hair and her mother's eyes. I held her in the hospital room while Thea slept exhausted from labor and felt something click into a place in my chest. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Not obligation or tradition or staying together because that's what people expected. Real connection, real love, real choice. Piper came to visit that afternoon, bringing flowers and a stuffed elephant she'd picked out herself. She cried when she held her baby sister, told Emma all about how she was going to be the best big sister in the world. I never thought I'd have a sibling, Piper said carefully, supporting Emma's head. This is the best gift. Dad, you're going to be an amazing sister, I told her. Emma's lucky to have you. Owen didn't come, didn't call, didn't even send a text. Melissa had posted something on social media about family betrayal that Piper showed me, but I didn't let it bother me. Owen would either figure out eventually or he wouldn't. I couldn't control that. What I could control was being present for the family I'd chosen and who'd chosen me back. We brought Emma home to a house filled with warmth and light. Thea had painted the nursery as soft yellow and neighbors had thrown us a small shower with practical gifts like diapers and baby clothes. The community had embraced us, and it felt right. 10 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Yvonne at a grocery store. She was alone, pushing a cart with a few basic items in it. She looked older, smaller somehow, like life had taken something essential from her. Russell, she said, stopping when she saw me with Emma and the carrier strapped to my chest. Yvonne, I replied neutrally. She's beautiful, Yvonne said, her voice catching. Your daughter, thank you. I heard you and Thea got married last month. Congratulations. We did. I kept it simple, just immediate family and close friends. A small ceremony in our backyard. Piper had been Thea's maid of honor. Yvonne stood there like she wanted to say more, but I didn't give her the opening. Emma started fussing and I adjusted her carrier. I need to get going, I said. Take care of yourself, Yvonne. I walked away without looking back. There was no anger anymore, no bitterness, just indifference. She was someone I used to know, and that was all she'd ever be again. That evening, I sat on the back porch with Thea while Emma slept in her bassinet between us. The car wash business was doing better than ever. I promoted 2 of my best managers to partner positions, giving them ownership stakes that motivated them to excel. It meant more passive income and less stress for me. What are you thinking about? Thea asked, her hand resting on mine. How everything had to fall apart so it could come together. Right, I said, if Yvonne hadn't left, I never would have found you. Never would have. Emma, never would have realized I was settling for being someone's reliable option instead of someone's first choice. You're my first choice, Thea said firmly. Every single day. And you're mine, I replied. Emma made a small sound in her sleep, and we both smiled. This was it. This was the life I was supposed to have. Not the one I'd planned or expected, but the one I'd fought for and earned and chosen with clear eyes and an open heart. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is the worst thing because it forces you to rebuild into something stronger than you were before.